Good evening and welcome on a Monday night. We're knee deep in spooky season. My name is JW Colwell, and I am joined by my host and Comic Con visitor, New York Comic Con visitor, I should say, Rich Drees. Rich Drees,
It's always nice to be knee deep. It's always nice to be knee deep in the spooky season because I'm normally just knee deep in the hoopla.
Yeah, well, okay, so I'm knee deep in the spooky season because I'm doing the crazy thing I did last year, which I shouldn't do ever again, but I really enjoy it. I'm getting 31 and 31 is what I'm calling it. JW 31 and 31. So 31 new to me horror films that I've not seen. And it's been great for the most part. Everything's been pretty good. There's a few clunkers here or there, but what are you going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so, for the most part, pretty great. Let's talk about you. You had a big weekend this weekend. You went to New York Comic Con. What are the three things, or four, or five? What are the 3 or 4 or 5 things that you're taking from New York Comic Con that you want to bring to our show tonight? What's one? Let's start there, and then we'll try to.
I was absolutely kind of meh on the idea of Starfleet Academy as the next Star Trek live action show.
Especially because they have the 31 show. They have the 31 movie lurking out there, and like 31 seems like it'd be much more interesting. Like the secret spy agency of Starfleet.
I would say it feels kind of runs counter to the ideals of the Federation that they still have a Department of Dirty Tricks. But yeah, I mean that's a whole philosophical argument that's been raging in.
That I hope they bring up in the show, right? They have to bring it up in the show.
Maybe they will. But
it seems like a perfect place. If you have a utopia, why are you creating a super secret group to fuck up other entities? Yeah. But okay.
We didn't see anything new for Strange New Worlds, but I'm on board with that show anyways. I think it's fantastic.
They released the trailer though. You didn't see the trailer?
Oh, the trailer. I'm sorry.
The clip was
whatever.
The clip was fucking borderline Wrath of Khan stuff. Like
the opening moments of the first episode of the first season. That's right.
Yeah,
I forgot about
the Enterprise versus
because honestly, for Starfleet Academy, I'm kind of like I was always like, I always hated that idea of like let's watch the cadets learn and stumble, and it sounds kind of boring to me, honestly. But first of all, they revealed that Tatiana Maslany has been cast in the show.
A good place to start.
And I don't know if they didn't quite clarify if she's been in all of season 1 so far, or if she's going to be in season 2, which Paramount just kind of ordered based on what they saw so far of season 1, which hasn't even, it's finished production.
Well, okay, so theoretically,
and it's getting ready to air.
Theoretically, we're going to follow a group of cadets, right? We're going to follow a group of cadets, and what Star Trek is hoping from this is that people will grow attached to these cadets, and that these cadets will work together and get on a ship, and then all of a sudden you have another Star Trek show just sitting there, like waiting to be used. The Strange New World stuff, I think it could work. Also, we're getting at least one episode that's all Kobayashi Maru. Every one episode, right? Okay, wait, hold on. We got questions here. Hold on. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening, Joe Ridgely. Good evening, Ken McKernan. Good evening, friends. And then Ken writes, how can you have not seen Carrie? Okay, so a couple things. The list includes movies I have seen, but I have not seen in a long time, and I actually haven't watched them. So I've been staying away from the ones that I like. Like sometimes you see movies, but then you don't remember them. I had the same thing going on today with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I know I've seen it. I know I've seen it, but I didn't remember it. I didn't remember that 2 people take the path three people take a path to fucking nowhere. Like, just the dumbest stuff. And like, so I don't remember them always. And I put Carrie on the list. The three that I put on my list for 3131, Ken, so you have this answer before we get back to Rich. I put
Yeah.
Carrie on the list. I put Psycho on the list because I don't remember seeing it in a long time. And I put The Innocents on the list, which I know I've seen, which is a fantastic Deborah Carr movie from the 60s. Black and white, Deborah Carr. It's the turn of the screw, right? So it's a fantastic movie. So I put it on maybe with the idea that I might get to it and get back to it just as an extra, like to a revisiting. Like I put down stuff I maybe want to revisit this year. So, Star of the Academy, you weren't excited, but now you are?
Yeah, just based on, they didn't show us diddly, but just that, Paramount seems psyched enough that they want to go with a second season. So I'm like, okay. If they're supportive, then I'm intrigued.
Maslany's, well, right, because the stuff they've been supportive recently has been good. Strange New Worlds is fantastic. Best Trek show.
However,
go ahead.
However, the stuff that's been good hasn't always been supported. Case in point, Lower Decks being canceled. I did see the first episode of, I believe, 2 that they are dropping this week when the new season premieres. It's a lot of fun. It doesn't quite resolve the Tendi cliffhanger as much as it does with the other one. It's a fun riff on a mirror story.
Oh, nice.
But they're not quite evil. They're just, the difference is like 0.23% difference between the two dimensions. And it's kind of recognizable by the other dimension has slightly darker color uniforms. So instead of red, it's like more of a slightly maroonish command.
Oh, that's cool. What's up?
Yeah, it's fun.
Jared Mora?
Okay. Hey, Jerry.
So what else did you learn at Comic-Con that you went, that your head spun? We had, when you were at Comic-Con, was the crypto part of that, or was that wasn't, right? That was like the day before, maybe? The crypto.
Yeah, that was a few days before.
That picture made my week.
That was a few days before. It made my phone.
Yeah, well, it made my week in the sense that one of the things that we've had a problem with, right? And you and I have talked about this extensively. I have a problem with the tonal structure, how they've treated Superman for a while. Like, it's been off since Man of Steel, and they haven't, like, they weren't able to fix it. I feel bad for Henry Cavill that we never got a course corrected for him. But I feel great for Henry Cavill, because now Henry Cavill's all of a sudden top of the list for Bond.
Possibly. I think he's too beefy for Bond. I mean, it would be a different
idea
that Fleming had.
Well, no. What if he's not a thug? What if he's just a really big, dangerous person? Like, not because I don't think they can do the same as.
Then it's Reacher.
Fair. But Aaron Taylor Johnson is too big too. Then, like, I don't know. Everybody that's in the running is huge, so it's like they're big people. Okay, so what else did you get at Comic-Con? Joe particularly sent me a message where he's like, "I need all the dirt from Rich at Comic-Con." What were the things that made you excited?
Last season of What We Do in the Shadows, which is also dropping this week, looks pretty good. They showed us the first 2 of the 3 episode drop that they're going to do. Looks like they're setting up some fun things, and they hinted that we may see the return of Jackie Daytona, human bartender.
Well, that's where it has to go, doesn't it? Like it.
Yeah. Well, they said they resisted on doing that because they weren't sure they could ever get as good a pop as they did the first time. But then they're like, well,
they're lying. They're lying about that.
They could be. They very well could be. But
like, they're lying in the sense that they couldn't get the same. The crowd
went wild.
The idea that they couldn't get that the moment he slipped behind a bar and put a toothpick in, that people wouldn't lose their fucking minds is crazy.
Mhm.
What else? What else happened what else? What else you got? So 2 episodes, so those are in good standing. That show's great though. That show's always been great.
Oh yeah.
It's never not been great. Like it's
Hmm.
we have a friend named Jeff who we continuously all we do is bomb him with the memes with Nadia saying Jesk. Jeff. Uh. Sounds like weakness.
Wow. Oh boy, let's see. Trying to remember. It's after 4 days, it does turn into a bit of a blur, I'll admit.
I'm sorry, I didn't do it right. Jeff. Also, just so we're clear for people at home, this is a Halloween Horror Night shirt that I bought a couple years ago. It's one of my favorite. Like, it's a shirt that I've just bought on the site because I love Halloween, but it didn't fit. Now it fits. It's kind of nice. So I've like I buy shirts sometimes and I'm like, these are hope shirts. and every once in a while I get to strap one on, which is nice.
Mm.
Were there any? Go ahead.
One thing, and this I learned on the last day there. I went to a panel hosted by featuring the head makeup guy for Saturday Night Live, and he talked about all the appliances that they do. Sarah Sherman kind of like was the other person on the panel. She was the one asking the questions and kind of guiding the discussion a bit, and she's really good at that.
I love her so much. She's easily
You're not
one of my. Oh, okay. You're not gonna like it.
I didn't get a selfie with her afterwards. I'm sorry.
Fuck you, Rich. I
Dude,
love her so much.
I'll tell you something off the
her stuff with Jost. Her stuff with Jost on Weekend Update is. Stop looking at me, creeper.
Yeah. She's fantastic at everything she does, and so because she involves like a lot of weird makeup stuff, like the eyeballs on the Hunchback and severed head stuff. She she was the ideal person to kind of help lead this discussion along, and it was a great thing. I didn't realize this. A good amount of their appliances, not like a full head appliance, but like smaller pieces, are 3D printed.
Wow.
All the cast members are scanned. They build those pieces up digitally, and then they print them out. Usually takes about 7 to 8 hours. The reason they don't do a full head is because it takes 24 hours to print out. But it was a really fascinating discussion. And this guy's he's been on the show since season 20 is when he got hired. In the makeup.
So he's
department.
made makeup appliances for so many people. Is essentially what it is.
Oh yeah. He brought a few with them to show off, and he says that the makeup stuff is so well cataloged and saved in their archive there. They still have the original full plaster cast, old school plaster style cast that they use to create the cone heads.
That's so. What's the price? What's the worth price?
I'm sorry.
Cone heads. What do you think? If they were to auction it, what would it be worth?
Oh, good God. I don't know, 60, 75 grand, 100. I honestly don't know how to evaluate something like that.
But that's just cool. That's
beyond
my
means.
Yeah, I can't afford it. Is essentially what it is.
I just won a ridiculously large amount of money in the lottery, kind of a purchase.
Yeah, and it shows up like the mold is sitting on your shelf one Monday night. So we did have.
I won't tell people, but there will be signs that I won the lottery.
Well, you can't tell people. It's just you can't. So we were. I was. Oh, go ahead.
They showed us, a little bit of War of the Rohirrim. They showed us about a 10-minute clip. I'm already excited because it's Tolkien, it's Weta. They kind of confirmed that yes, this film exists in the Peter Jackson version of The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. and it just looks fantastic. I'm super excited. Again, that was something when they first announced and said we're going to kind of go with an anime style. I was like, eh, but it looks wonderful.
It
The
does
director
look
was
good.
talking about
The posters are very nice, and it's like it's not something I
the
would jump at, but I'll probably go
yeah,
see.
they were talking about one of the inspirations for the character of Hera, who basically is unnamed in Tolkien. Uh, it's like the unnamed daughter of Helm Hammerhand did this and this, and they kind of are filling in the blanks about her in this. And they said one of the things that was an inspiration for this character was in Miyazaki's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind.
Okay.
Which is an amazing film. Even if anime isn't really your style, your bag, I'd recommend anything Miyazaki anyways.
Yeah,
but this one was one I saw in college decades ago.
We were talking about that. We were talking about that at D&D this week. How much of his
really?
work? Yeah, we were just like, because I think they're running a lot of them right now. Like, there's a Studio Ghibli thing going on. And we're talking about like Howl's Moving Castle and Kiki's Delivery Service, my neighbor Totoro, and just like all like how important his stuff is because it translates into other areas of animation and other film areas, and it just kind of it balances out. It moves through everything,
And at the OneRing.net, which is the largest Tolkien site online, they had a party that I got into.
I saw that you met Philippa Boyens, right?
Yes, which was like big for me in the fact that in the spring of 2002, I got to meet Peter Jackson and Fran Walsh at an event at Barnes and Noble on Union Square in New York City that Christopher Lee and Howard Shore were also at.
So
it was insane.
You've crossed out all the creative makers of the Rings trailer.
The Philippa Boyens was the one check mark I had been holding on to for 22 years now to make, and I was very happy to
Did you tell her she was a check mark? Did you
no,
did you be like, just so you know, I've been waiting 22 years to cross you off my bucket list?
No, nothing like that. But they showed us a little bit of Creature Commandos, and then they released that trailer. And when
it's a good trailer, it's an effective trailer.
Although most of the cast was there, but towards the end of the panel, it kind of did turn into, okay, what's going on with everything else, James Gunn? Because you're here, and we're going to ask you no matter what. And
where the fuck is Batman, James Gunn? Where's your Batman? Who's your Batman?
Doesn't know.
When's the Superman trailer? When is the Superman trailer coming out? December.
It's not too far away, but it's not too soon. My thought, and I've been saying this for a while now, Super Bowl Sunday. Drop Superman on Super Bowl. And
I was thinking that too, but he frequents that one Brazilian film festival every year.
That's true.
Right? In December. And it's right around the time in December with, I could easily see it being on anything from Moana through Sonic. Right? I mean, legit placement. And like, a Warner Brothers, Warner Brothers has in
Warner
the bag,
Brothers has War of the Rohirrim, so you're gonna get your geek crowd in anyways. Maybe drop it on that weekend, which is right before Christmas.
I think this could be one of those crazy trailer things where you're like, you buy a ticket, and you just want to see the trailer on the big screen.
Also, I wouldn't be surprised if he dropped it on whatever the anniversary date in December is for the release of Superman the movie.
That wouldn't be a bad date as well. It's been a really good year for Christopher Reeve and the Reeve Superman. And like I said, when you showed the picture, the Crypto Superman picture, it has the vibe that I need in my.
It warmed my heart.
It has the vibe. Like, anyway, speaking of vibes, let's.
One last thing too out of that, and then I'm kind of done with the con. He noted that because Creature Commandos kind of comes off one way, his Superman film is going to have a different feel. Lanterns is going to feel a little different. Supergirl is going to have its own thing. It's not going to be homogenized. And he stopped just short of saying the way they do it over at Marvel. But that was kind of, I feel, the intent of that statement.
Lanterns. I'm not going to lie. The Lanterns casting that came out before Comic-Con last week, with Aaron Pierce coming off of Rebel Ridge as John Stewart, like the one Green Lantern we've been waiting for on screen, and not a bad choice. The football coach, being Hal Jordan, not a bad choice. So the Supergirl thing, there was a lot of talk, I guess, at the con about how good her audition was. Millie Adcock,
yes, he
right?
did mention that. He did mention
how
that he
great,
saw,
how fantastic she was. Like, just and to be honest, if you've watched House of the Dragon, you kind of already know she's fantastic. So
yeah.
Speaking of fantastic, let's talk about numbers. I like numbers. Smile 2 is doing fantastic. A movie first movie that was, this is a direct story, Rich, of a franchise born out of the fact that Paramount didn't stream it, right? They tested it. It tested through the roof. They released the first movie. The first movie grosses $100 million right at the end of the quarantine pandemic era, right? When people want to go to the movies again. This movie, better. I saw it. It's bigger, better, gorier, well designed. They don't really answer all the questions about the monster, but it's like the interesting thing about the franchise is, and this is a strange thing for horror franchises, and this is not a shock, it's not a spoiler or anything. This monster's 2-0. The demon hasn't lost. So it's not like Jason. It's not like Jason coming back, getting beaten, and dropped into the lake. Right? Part of the fun of the franchise, I think, a movie that grossed $23 million this weekend on not a shoestring, but a bigger budget than the first one, right? Budget on this one was like something like $80 million. So a little bit more. They get a little bit more money. They get Naomi Scott, who's really good in this, really great. We find out that the demon likes to eat on trauma. Trauma is a big deal for this demon. He likes trauma. He eats it. Nom, 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 nom. And her struggling musician is a perfect foil because she's got nothing but trauma. And she's really good. But they've done a really good job with this franchise. And I think what I think is most interesting, and I was talking about with one person about it, the idea that this franchise, we haven't had a win yet. We haven't had somebody get into the ring and beat it. So the moment that, like, they've immediately created a movie, a sequel that's going to be different from any of the other ones. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's weird to have that in a franchise, a horror franchise, because horror franchises kind of require the good guys to win. Like, the bad guys can be cool, but the good guys usually have to win most of the time, right? And especially Icon, we're going to talk about one that doesn't win tonight, but it's one of those things where, I don't. I think there's going to be ample field to make an interesting sequel that we haven't seen before because he's 2-0. The demon's 2-0. Okay. Let's talk. Also, Joker down another 69%, 2.1 million. I got the confirmation. I think it's dropping on video on demand tomorrow. Epic failure. And all of these movies that are succeeding, Rich, Smile 2, 23 million. Wild Robot, 10 million, although they're saying that some of those numbers could be goose because people are buying tickets to the Wild Robot and sneaking into Terrifier 3. Terrifier 3 was $9.3 million, only down 51%, which is staggering for a genre film. So only dropped 51%. That movie, again, costing $2 million to make, Rich, is at $36 million. An epic Titanic win. Much like what we're going to talk about tonight, a movie that was made on a shoestring budget that ended up grossing so much money and so many ancillary things, right? And then Beetlejuice, only down 32%, even though it's on video on demand, squeaking along up to 283.9. So like one of Michael Keaton's biggest movies in his career, which is great. And then he hosted Saturday Night Live this week, and he looked like he was having a fucking blast. There was a Michael Myers sketch that was amazing. So
that was pretty funny.
Also,
there was
the fucking cookie sketch. The cookie sketch was amazing. Like the cookie sketch was. I know it was sweaty balls.
Every now and then, that show decides it wants to chase the high it got with sweaty balls, and they never will ever catch it.
They'll never catch it.
It was lightning in a bottle, and they're just not.
It was lightning in a bottle that they tried 3 times. But they did do a great job with the Brett Baer interview. Like just but they had great timing. Just the back and forth.
When you have almost 20 members in your cast, though, it is a little off-putting to see them having to bring in, guest stars just to play these certain characters. And I sort of get the idea of stunt casting it, but I'm like, you guys got some really good people here. Why don't you let them have their turn to shine as Brett Baer, as Kamala?
I think it's for the viral thing. I don't think it's necessarily a dig at the talent of the people that are on the show. I think it's more like we desperately want this to be mentioned on Morning Joe and on CNN and on Meet the Press,
and on TikTok and blah 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 blah,
and Instagram. And how do you do that? Well, I don't know that you do Alec Baldwin. Like that one is a weird one because it's like he just got off almost killing somebody. Like I
think bringing Baldwin back kind of does hey, remember when he did Trump? And we got again, they're chasing that high. And I mean, James Austin Johnson's amazing as Trump. His Trump is fantastic. And it's light years better than
the November 2nd episode is definitely going to lead with Trump talking about schlongs, because that's where we're at. Fuck. Okay, that's perfect. That is a perfect segue. Let's talk classic movies. Let's talk this classic movie. Who will survive and what will be left of them? The answer is not much. Like,
not many and not much.
Not many, not much. Well, there's not, like, okay, so part of the allure of rewatching this movie, right, and 50 years later, is that it, and we'll start with production, as we always do, but part of the allure of watching this 50 years later is, and what you have to take into account when you're watching it is the beginning of the slasher franchise, right? The slasher genre begins here, right? Jumping through windows, going down bad passages, walking away and separating. Like all of these things, they're quaint now. And the funny thing is, production, when they're making this movie, Hooper doesn't put any blood in. He's desperately trying for a PG rating. And now the movie, like Rich, I'm not saying the movie would be PG. It wouldn't even be PG-13. There's no nudity. There's very little blood.
there's no language really either.
There's no language. There's very
I
little
mean, my
blood.
God, if I was being chased by, a crazy
I'd be
guy
like,
with a
get the
chainsaw on
fuck away
somebody
from
else's face, I'd be screaming, fuck shit, fuck, 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 fuckity, fuck, 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 motherfucking
Well,
gotcha.
then, yeah, that whole
You know,
briar patch thing is just awful. But yeah, I mean, the interesting thing is they were going for PG, and so he left out all the blood. Jerry says it still holds up for how old it is. I agree. I totally. Yes, it holds up remarkably well. What holds
Mhm.
up, like Jerry, what holds up? It's not the violence. With the amount of things that Rich, you, Jerry, and I have seen, the violence doesn't necessarily hold up because it's very little violence, small amounts of violence. What holds up is the incredibly raw tension of the violence because like this is one of those movies I feel you can, if they did it in smell-o-vision, you know what I mean? Like if they did it like Polyester, the John Waters movie, and they had smells, the the
Mhm.
the smell of the truck, the smell of the hitchhiker, the smell of the house, all of those things would be awful. Like, and it would like, and it just translates. And this is another thing I was going to say. It still is unknown fear, along with great camera work and sound effects. Yeah, there's sound effects that I don't even know what the fuck they are, and they're tense, and like the whole movie's tense. Once two people go down the path, like I was telling you, I think the funniest thing for me is when you're rewatching it after bathing in slasher films like I have in the last 3 weeks. It's so quaint. It's quaint that people are stupid, this stupid in a film. And
It's
also
kind of an ode to bad decisions, really.
yes, well, but this is the every other bad decision in every other movie is an ode to this, right? They make
Mhm.
the bad decision that we're going to go swimming. They make overtures that they're going to go swimming, but they're also going to have sex. So dead, right? Like, and then like
But they don't even get close to
they don't even get close to that.
initial
Also,
foreplay
like
even.
the
You know,
funny,
it's
we're going to talk about it, but the funniest thing is, if I go in near a house that has a giant fucking, thing running for electricity, and I look under a fucking tarp, and there's nothing but cars that aren't running or don't look like they've been run, that tells me that those people have been killed. I'm leaving. Like, and that's what's so quaint about it. It's so quaint that you just sit there and you're like, oh, that's such a bad decision. That's yeah. I mean, and then the other thing that we're talking about going for PG, and all of this movie stems from like you read about it, and one of the most interesting things is that Hooper is living at the University of Texas at Austin, and he's working as a documentary filmmaker. So the movie starts off documentary-ish, right? And
Mhm.
then he's trying to make this horror film about in the woods, isolation, darkness, all these different things. But he gets bombarded by the news out of San Antonio about all the violence in the society, and so he starts reading up on serial killers. So
As
Ed
one does.
Gein. Ed Gein is the one we all talk about. This guy has inspired so many movies, and we've only had one or two movies literally about him. But you figure Psycho, this, Silence of the Lambs, right? They're all in the Ed Gein Appreciation Society. And and basically he makes this movie, and it's basically it becomes this wildly crazy movie, right?
Mhm.
Uh, he works with Kim Henkel, and they form this company to make it, and she's the president, he's the vice president. They try to get funding from all these different places. They get $60,000. Great, right? And but it's all from different, like all these different points where they're trying to get all the money to make this movie, and it becomes like a group effort, like a communal thing, where they're everybody's living together, they're working on the movie, everybody's working dirt cheap. They have to sell profit points, sell everything, right? You know, all these different things to get this movie filmed, right?
Hmm.
They film in a farmhouse that's basically still around, still around apparently, in Round Rock, Texas. And I guess it's a place where people go and visit now. And they film 7 days, 16 hours a day, hot environment. This is what I was going to ask if we had had a guest tonight. I want to know about the conditions. 110 on July 26th, and Gunnar Hansen is rumored to have said, and it was 95, 100 degrees every day filming. I'm wearing stuff. They wouldn't wash my costume because they were concerned that it would get lost or that it would change color. They didn't have enough money for a second costume, so he wore that fucking mask, Rich, for 12 to 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for a month.
Ugh.
Ugh. The smell, the smell of Vision, Rich, the smell of Vision version of this movie. So you can see it on screen. You can, as you're watching it, right?
Hmm.
And they use a 60 millimeter camera. They do low speed. It needs more light, and it didn't work like a modern digital camera or even film stock, right? So you know, it allowed for more mobility, and it gives the sense of the movement of the movie, because the movie is kind of like the way it's shot, Rich, is very similar to like just a herky jerky kind of Born Identity way, right?
I
It's just
I'd almost call it cinema verite because it's
yeah,
very handheld.
it's very
It's kind of
handheld.
hidden.
It's herky jerky. It puts
Hmm.
you into the shoes of the characters as bad things are
Right,
happening.
but not as badly as Born Identity did it, to be honest. But
Nothing could be as bad as the Born Identity with regards to herky jerky camera motion. I'll never forgive him for that. Anyway, um, they do all the filming in the farmhouse. The house had no air conditioning, no ventilation. Um, and then they get the slaughterhouse they pass, Rich. They get all of their fucking, they get their blood products put on the walls and spray on the walls from there. And then they drove around and collected remains and did all kinds of stuff and found animal bones and shit and littered the floor. So that's all real shit, Rich. It's all real.
disturbing at all.
Well, it's like
But
you
yeah.
say you want to make a movie. It becomes like with these older films that are indie darlings, right? That are the first indie darlings. This Halloween, right? They're the first movies that don't have full studio support, that are made by filmmakers where they're kind of just pushed out there, and they're doing everything
Mhm.
on a guerrilla way, right?
Yeah, well,
I was reading real fucking
technology was
bones,
starting.
Rich.
Yeah, the technology was starting to come down a bit in cost. Not the way it did with the leap to video and then digital, but it was allowing like smaller indie productions. If you could scrape together a couple of $1,000s, you could do some stuff like this. Uh, and we're starting to see this is the film school generation. So they're coming out of film schools. They have that knowledge. They go to make these kind of like low budget things. This roughly is on par with like other things of that era that was coming out right there in the late 60s through the early 70s in terms of how it came together as a production. But it wasn't until roughly now that they really started doing horror stuff, though.
Rich, I was reading the back. You read the background and stuff, and you try to find the story. The story's in the movie. When you watch the movie, it's intense, it's grainy, it's gritty. The whole movie feels like great. It feels like you have sand in your teeth, like you're at the
Mm-hmm.
fucking beach and you got sand stuck somewhere. But this one was one of the more shocking. On-screen blood was real in most cases, such as when Leatherface feeds Grandpa, played by the Indie Escape Network's own John Dugan, a good friend of the network. We wish we could have had him, but he's doing a con, I believe, or traveling tonight, so we couldn't get him. Crew had difficulty getting the stage blood to come out of its tube, so Burns got cut with a razor. So it was real blood. It was before hepatitis. The scene where where Leatherface dismembers Kirk. Uh, basically, they basically use a running chainsaw within 3 inches of the actor's actual face. A real hammer was used for the scene at the end. Some scenes had a mock-up, but most of the time, Dugan's aiming for the floor. But so dangerous shoot, guerrilla filmmaking, real fucking blood. It's and Hooper felt
Bullshit
that
not involved.
Hooper noting that the rap party, all cast members had obtained some level of injury. He said that everyone hated me by the end of the production. It just took years for them to kind of cool off. So everybody came out of it with an injury. Hansen had injuries, plus he was, he had heat exhaustion on 1 or 2 days during filming. And they still have the gas station is up and running. So, the original budget goes from 60,000 and about 288,000 adjusted for inflation during editing. So the final cost of the film figures between 93,000 and 300,000. So if you adjust for inflation, it'd be 447,000 and 1.4 million, give or take. A group called Pie in the Sky bought the movie late, and provided another $25,000 to help with the thing. So they bought 19% of the company. Like it becomes this huge, like they're selling off chunks of the movie, right? They're selling off chunks of the movie. So one of the reasons Tobe Hooper doesn't get rich like John Carpenter does, right? Is that vast chunks of this movie, Rich, were sold. Like, like points on a mortgage. Like, and
that's
it becomes
the
like
devil's deal you make with indie film fundraising.
well, but I just think it's interesting. Like, if you think of somebody that's made an independent movie, like you think of like Kevin Smith, or you think of like, I think of John Carpenter, because John Carpenter for me is the one that started it for me, and then Kevin Smith is the one that came after and just made indie films, made enough money to make his movies the way he wanted, and then did whatever. But Hooper here, they have to agree to a distribution agreement. They, you know what I mean? Like they gave up 35% of the profits to them. So this becomes a horror story for the filmmakers. And even had ended up in bankruptcy court. You know what I mean? Only in 1983, when New Line finally acquired the rights and everything from a lot of these shady companies, they eventually gave the producer a share of the profits and for the re-releases and everything. It's a story of a really cool independent movie that becomes one of the greatest blockbusters of all time, but nobody involved with the movie ends up making any money. Like 35% here, 25% here, 35% here. It becomes like an auction. And then they only start seeing any of the receipts almost 10 years later in 83, when New Line finally gets them and New Line starts to take care of them. But New Line acquires them specifically so they can make more movies. You know what I mean? So it becomes like this dread circle, right? But the production stuff I was reading, just horrific. Horrible heat, real blood, real injuries, real, no props that were real. Real briar. Like the outfit that Burns wears, right? The outfit that Sally wears, they said at some point it was never clean, and it the pants could stand on their own. They were soaked in blood, dirt, and sweat. The jeans could stand.
I do want to make a call out of the cinema. We talked a little bit about the cinematography here, and how it's and I said it's cinema verite. There are some great shots in this movie where Pam is sitting on the bench outside the house and we are under the bench, and then she walks towards it, and the camera moves from under the bench and up. That's fantastic. I would wish I kind of saw like some behind the scenes footage of, did they have the camera in a trench and then somebody offside picks it up from there? But it's so smooth. It's an incredible
maybe
shot.
Maybe like a stick, or like a something curved where they could hold it up under the chair.
I don't know.
I don't know. But you're right. The film is.
I have a couple thoughts, but there are like expensive solutions to this problem, which I'm sure they didn't have the money to spend on.
And that's the thing. It looks and feels like they're spending a lot. Well, actually, that's not true. It doesn't look like they're spending anything at all. But when you think about like every haunted attraction you've ever been to, or every place you've ever been to, or where they're trying to do a horrific theme and the props, just in like a dime store restaurant, right? Or like fake bones, these are real fucking bones. Everything's fucking real. That moment when the girl falls in the room and it's just fucking chicken feathers and fucking bones from everywhere, and they look like they're out of place, and you're like, why the fuck are there so many bones? And then you realize they just picked up shit off the ground and threw it in the room, and then she had to fall on it. And it's just this kind of production where you're just like, if you didn't have a fucking scar coming out of it, congratulations. You know what I mean? And then,
if you didn't have a scar coming out of this movie, were you even in this movie?
Were you even there? Were you even there?
It's a variation of, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there.
That's exactly right. But the thing about it, like I said, the other thing that comes across is like the cinema verite truth of it. The idea that the locations are still there and in many ways are operating, haunted bed and breakfasts and haunted dinner places is great. I love that it survived all these years. The sad thing for me is that unlike John Carpenter, who made a ton of money and then just, made whatever fucking movies he wanted and, kind of worked with studios but didn't have to, and Tobe Hooper didn't get that chance, right? He got fucking racked every time something came. Like there are movies that they make where they're like, where people are like, selling things like before they're selling Peter to pay Paul, you know what I mean? And it just, hold on, let's see. 3 on a meat hook. Also, yes, production, we should talk about the other titles. The other titles are fucking amazing, Rich. I don't know if you've heard them. The other titles are fucking amazing. During development, names considered for the film. Ready? Saturn in Retrograde. From that crazy lady reading the book. Head cheese. Stalking Leatherface and Leatherface. So, but head cheese, I love head cheese. The graininess of the film adds to the realism. Yeah, it looks like somebody's walking along just like filming. And actually, I don't even know that you could recreate the graininess even with a wacky iPhone filter. Like, I don't know if you could. You know what I mean? Like, look what your brother did to the door. The hammer hit and door slammer sound effects is the absolute best. The hammer hit is like a dull thud. The first guy that gets hit, that dude that gets hit. But Rich, the reason I think it's a dull thud is because I think he actually hit him with the hammer. So it's like, all of this shit is real. The blood is real. Like, I was thinking to myself, it looks like she really cut her finger. That's a really good, cut finger trick. And then I read the fucking stuff, the production notes. No, they sliced her fucking finger open and stuck it in another person's mouth. Like, we're lucky to have this movie, and we couldn't have this movie today. We can't have nice things. So like, and this is just to give you an idea of the grunge. Look at these people. A set of people. They're in a van. You know what I mean? Like, it looks murky in the van. I also was thinking about this. this is one of those movies where it's like before disability became an actual thing where people cared about, right, Rich?
Mm-hmm.
Fucking boards that come out of the truck, and so he has to wheel his wheelchair down. He has, like, look at the sets. The sets are fucking grimy. Leatherface looks great. Like it, and then she looks absolutely abysmally terrified every time something happens in this movie, right? And
Probably was in real life, so that's not
well,
accuracy.
you had to be going back to the hotel, or God forbid they were staying at the fucking house, Rich. Yeah. Okay, so box office, Rich.
It does
When you,
okay.
it was okay. When you look up the numbers, okay, so it cost 140,000 is what we're talking about. 140,000
Mhm.
in 1974. This movie's 50 years old, Rich. We don't have any, like, it didn't plan, we don't have a number of theaters it played in. We don't, just kind of, it moved around the country, right? This movie grossed $26 million in 1974 money, Rich. It grossed 100. We were talking about a movie last week that had grossed 3 times its budget. This movie grossed 190.4 times its production budget. And again, the thing you need to take from this is that the filmmakers, actors, everybody involved, nada, zip, but
Yeah.
$26 million in 1974 money, Rich. They don't actually have it on the site we use for numbers. But 26.4 million adjusted for inflation. Hold on. Let's see what it is. Inflation calculator. Good call. From 1974, let's do that. And we'll do 26.4 million. 26. 1, 2, 3, 4. How many zeros? 4 zeros, right? Calculate.
Yeah. I'm done. I still have con fog, so it's like math is not great.
Math is hard.
Math is hard.
Math is hard.
I don't number well.
Hold on. I'm adding zeros. I think I got it. 164 million. $164 million right now. So a minor hit, but still
Yeah.
26 point on a $140,000 budget, incredible. And then it gets released, right? So critical response then and now, it gets released. It opens all over, like, not all over the country. Premiered in Austin, Texas on October 1st, 1974. So we're very close, by the way, to the actual. Almost a year after filming concluded, it screened nationally in the United States as a Saturday afternoon matinee, and its false marketing as a true story helped it attract a broad audience. Um, and then every 8 years after 1976, it got reissued in first-run theaters with full-page ads. The film eventually grossed more than 30 million in the United States, making it the 12th highest-grossing film initially released in 1974, despite its budget. And it's Rich. The only movie that overtook it was eventually in '78 when Halloween grossed 47 million.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, the other things that came up during the release is that the MPAA gave it an R rating, although it was originally rated X, right? But Hooper was hoping for a PG. So he cut a couple minutes, and he did the Scorsese thing where he cut something that he thought was okay without it, and then sent it back, and it got the R, right? people had walked out of theaters. Uh, police people were stationed at the theater warning people about going in. It got a 1 year it got banned in England, and it was banned on the advice of British Board of Film Censors. Um, it got banned in Australia, um, and it finally was released in Australia in 2021. Rich, 2021, and it
Well,
didn't
officially.
and officially, and it didn't get released in Russia till 2024. Although I hear Putin's a huge fan. He just likes that guy, but it's a little dirty. Um, the opening crawl, of course, becomes a major point of contention, because it's an opening crawl that falsely suggests the film is based on true events, but it is also the reason it did so well. Um, what do you think of that? Are they
Um,
playing fair?
I mean, Hooper has gone on to say that that was a kind of like his dig at the U.S. government, how they would deny a lot of things that they were involved with going on around the world. It's kind of like a fake news before fake news, I guess we could call it. And other filmmakers picked it up. Obviously, the most famous one that I can think of off the top of my head is the Coen brothers at the beginning of Fargo.
Coen Brothers,
Where they
Big
say
and Fargo, Blair Witch Project.
Blair Witch Project, yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I mean, nowadays
it's
you can't really get away with it because somebody's just gonna pull out their phone and go, "Oh, really? Google, did this shit happen?"
I was thinking
And
about that, right? As I'm watching it, like you can't get away with it now. And
Mhm.
also, we like you and I discuss every once in a while. We have the discussion on our show, inspired by, based on, uh, you know, based on a true story, inspired by a true story. Fucking Beautiful Mind, the Beautiful Mind question, right? How real is it? And so
Mhm.
now, like, it's like we've taken all the fun away of the amusement park ride, right? Um,
Mhm.
the close-up eye scenes with her screaming were fantastic as well. Yes, they're
Yes,
also
very
because
much.
the close-up on the eyes are so amazing, but whatever is being played on the soundtrack, is it a fucking like razor being scraped against a fucking radio? Is it like, I don't know what the fuck the sounds are, but they're super disturbing. Um, and it just becomes one of those, the whole movie, like, whether or not it's fake, whether or not, you know what I mean, like it's, you know, the reaction you get watching it is still intense. Like
Mhm.
it's one of the very few movies that you can rewatch and go, the tension remains the same, because you're just like, oh, I don't know if I need to see this like right now. Like, um, critical response. Let's see. Roger Ebert. Roger Ebert said it was as violent and gruesome and blood-soaked as the title promises, but he called it, but he called the acting and technical execution amazing. Right.
Yeah,
So,
which is a pretty interesting concession from him because
because he
he
didn't
was
like
not
horror
a fan
films.
of slashers and horror films, and just a few years later, once he starts doing at the movies sneak previews, um, all the different variations of that show that he did with Gene
He
Siskel,
rakes slasher
both
films. Oh,
hated slashers. Yeah.
slasher films he hates. But I think you can, from a critical standpoint, you can look at this. You know what I mean? You can look at this movie and see that it's well made. It's not like a lot of other slashers. And then variety. How about this shit? It's a well made movie, but it has heavy doses of gore. Folks, I don't know if you know this, but there's very little blood in this movie. There is not a lot of blood. There's one maybe leg scene that's bloody, and everything else is kind of sounds and looking at something that maybe on a hook. Like, we know it's not. She's not on a hook. I mean, maybe she was. I don't fucking know after reading the production notes. Um, but the interesting thing, it, it, that's the thing. It feels well made, right? It feels
Mhm.
super like as we look at it as critic now, like aesthetically, it's an incredible aesthetic that they create. Just I feel like the smell comes through the television, right? And that's where the power comes from. The intrinsic quality of the movie comes from, as you read about it, the idea that these people were actually running around in the hot Texas sun, and it must smell. It must smell terrible. Rich, I can't get past the smell. But it's also foreboding. It also sets up so many of the prerequisite things that the slasher genre is going to become known for. Right? It becomes a bedrock movie. Like,
Yeah. I
and
mean,
most of it happens in the fucking daylight, which makes it even worse. Right? Like,
mhm.
so, but like people going to,
I mean,
go down.
Marilyn Burns as Sally here becomes the prototype for the final girl in every,
In every
movie
movie.
ever.
Every
Yeah.
movie. Although I'm still worried about the trucker that stopped and got out of his truck.
Yeah, he throws the wrench and disappears.
It's a good wrench shot, by the way. It's a great
Yeah.
wrench shot. He throws the wrench and then runs the other direction. Sally gets in the truck and drives away. Um, but like I said, I think the most amazing thing about the movie is that it is so well put together. It's confining. Like it puts you in this space. And I think, like I said, my thing is watching all these like movies where you watch movies, um, slasher prototypes are all set in this movie. Everything's set. Like the final girl jumping out of a window and the guy looking down at her and then going the other direction. And you're like, holy shit, bitch, get up. Like, what are you doing? Move. And then, but this is a good point Jerry makes. Everyone wanted Franklin to get it because he was annoying. Ha ha ha. Yes. Yes, Franklin is not like I think we've become very, very. First off, I think that is one of the critiques we can make.
He's not very sympathetic.
He's not sympathetic, and there is not a lot of sympathy for him in this movie. Like, uh, he's tolerated more than anything. And when he finally does meet his maker, I don't know that he's already screaming at people, and he's like, he is. Although he will become his own trope, right? He'll become the the basically bitter disabled person in a movie, right? Like that in a horror film that you're like, okay, I'm okay with that person going. I don't really want them to survive, right?
Hmm.
But it's like that's the thing about this movie is you watch it and like all the different things that are just on screen, and actually it is well made. It's incredibly well made. The tension you can like the first like I'll tell you what scene that the first time Leatherface shows up, right? So there's the trap room, right, where the room has got all these heads on the wall, and the guy walks in, and as he walks in, Leatherface comes around the corner, hits him with a fucking hammer,
Boink.
screams, boink, screams, and then slams the metal door shut, and it's terrifying. He is the first horror icon. He's the first guy we go, I don't know what the fuck's like. And think about it, it's the first time on film where we have a killer that doesn't talk, can't like isn't really making communications. We don't know what's going on. He has a distinctive wardrobe. He is the first horror icon. Like, and I understand people are going to say Norman Bates or whatever, but in reality, Norman Bates talked. Norman Bates had several things going on. He's ahead of his time, but he's not. He's not in the same horror icons that I'm talking about from the '70s. When you have Michael Myers, uh, Leatherface. We get Jason in '82.
Yeah, mm, I would say this is the first time I mean, horror movies before. Okay, we've had monsters like Frankenstein or the werewolf, But they're like creations of man or a curse or something like that. This is the first, and even somebody who is a psychopath like Norman Bates. This is the first time, though, I think, without doing too deep a dive, but I think this is really the first time audiences saw a human, but who was actually
A monster.
a monster. Couldn't communicate. He was kind of a Frankenstein character in a way because he can't
Right. He
communicate.
breaks the door. He gets in trouble, and he scuttles in the corner.
Yeah, he
The
kind of
later
cowers
sequences of him, do an incredible job of making it compassionate, right? But then the person that's cheerleading is the grimy hitchhiker who nobody likes either. And we do all the work. You cook the meat. That's all you do. And I'm just sitting there going, And Leatherface is at that moment, like I was watching, there is a streak of compassion for him. He's dressed in his finest. He's feeding his grandpa, and then he's trying to help his grandpa with the hammer. We've all been there, right? Trying to help an elderly person with a hammer hit the blonde that's on the floor over the bucket. It's going to catch all her blood. Anyway, that particular thing, those particular things, the distinctive outfit, the guttural, thing, that whole thing. It's something we've never seen before, and then we get it becomes the basic. Leatherface, Michael Myers, all of these icons that we're still he is the granddaddy of them all, right down to Art the Clown, right? Because Art the Clown doesn't talk like Leatherface. So I mean, he is the patient zero for the slasher genre, and you can see why people would root for him or why people like him, because there's a couple sequences where he's demure, right? Like that one sequence where the cook is yelling at him, right? And he's like, and he's like kind of backing off. Like, it's a great performance. It's a great performance that Gunnar Hansen probably deserves a lot more credit for, especially when you hear about 16-hour days in very sweaty clothes. But as all good things, when we have a legacy franchise viability, holy shit, Rich, Jesus, it's just, we have had a Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right, released almost like clockwork, and like I said, like, none of them come close, right? We've had for franchise, we've had 74, the original, 2003.
The only one that splits chainsaw into two words, by the way.
Yes.
Which I'm always perplexed by.
Okay. So 74, we had 86, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which, not going to lie to you, pretty good sequel. Pretty well done. It also has a batshit insane performance from Dennis Hopper. I'm not gonna talk badly about it. It also deals with a late night radio host. It's really fun. But you got 1986. We got one in 2003 that grosses $80 million. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, by the way, only grosses $8 million in 86. Texas Chainsaw, the remake, I think it's the Jessica Biel one in 2003, $80 million, huge hit. I think at that point it's produced by Michael Bay's production, Platinum Dunes, right? Then we have 2006, we have Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning. Also I forgot, Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 in 1990, which was X-rated and you couldn't get into unless you were 18 years old. So, like, it's a viable franchise. And then we recently had one on Netflix that didn't have any box office gross because Netflix didn't release it, which was the dumbest fucking thing. Because these movies, they make money, Rich. Like, they make a ton of cash. Although we're at a point of diminishing returns. The Netflix movie was not great. So the franchise viability is there. The legacy is always going to be that it is the granddaddy, right? It is
Yeah,
the progenitor of the species, right? It is the apex predator
it's
of
on
its
the whole subgenre here.
right. It spawns an entire subgenre. Leatherface had no idea what to do. He's like scared child with no other option. That's where I think the remake got him wrong. Yeah, well, the remake is weird. Like the Netflix remake is really weird. It has all kinds of weird shit going on. Although it has a lot more people to kill that you're rooting. You're not necessarily rooting for them, right? That's the other thing where the franchise kind of takes a turn, right? This particular franchise. The first movie, you're clearly rooting for Marilyn Burns and her friends to get out, right? And like I said, to a lesser extent, the guy driving the truck, right? You're rooting for them to escape. As the movies start to progress out, your people are more there rooting for Leatherface. Although I will say, when the Jessica Biel version hits in 2003, Jessica Biel is very popular. She's coming off Party of Five. She's in a very low cut outfit. Everything's working for her in that movie, right? So I
Yeah.
think the interesting thing about the franchise though is at some point the franchise begins to be about people going and enjoying people being butchered as opposed to this intrinsically well-made film that happens to have butchering in it. And I think that's, the legacy is always going to be, I think the franchise viability is interesting because everybody wants to take a shot at their version of Leatherface. Every up and coming filmmaker wants to take a shot, and like they're varying degrees, right? Sometimes, Rich, we get lucky with like a Fede Alvarez who comes on and does a really good Evil Dead movie, and then does a really good Alien Romulus movie. But 9 times out of 10, these people get shots at Leatherface. They're not they're not in his ballpark. I don't even know that they're playing his sport. But I think everybody's going to always try to take shots.
Yeah.
But the legacy to me will always be that it is patient zero of a genre that I can't get enough of. Like I like slasher. I like how they're structured. I like how they play out. I like rooting for people to make good decisions. Um, we talked about Smile. I think it's one of the reasons that whatever Smile movie decides somebody's going to get a chance to beat the demon, that movie is going to make a ton of cash. Not that the first two haven't, but the one where the demon loses will be the one that everybody talks about. And as long as the filmmaker stays and keeps on doing it. And that's what happened here. Like, eventually we got to the point where we're not rooting for the good guys anymore. This movie becomes a horror icon, and he becomes a horror icon because you're rooting for him. You're rooting for, like, my tagline tonight was the Saw is family, right? The Saw is family. Like, that was the tagline for Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3. And I just found it to be the funniest fucking tagline. It's on a poster. I have the poster. It's one of the greatest posters I've ever seen.
I do want to also, kind of throw some love towards Tobe Hooper, as the mad mastermind behind
genius.
this whole thing.
Yeah.
I have to say that his career should have gone better for him. When he got to, when he got to the bigger studios, I mean, he, in 1982, he does Poltergeist, which is an amazing film. But everybody kind of, there's that whole Steven Spielberg shadow directed it bullshit that goes around, and it's not true. Hooper is the director on that film. Spielberg was there sometimes, but just as a producer offering suggestions. Every call, every shot was ultimately Hooper's call and Hooper's shot. So anybody who says that Poltergeist is actually a Steven Spielberg movie should be kicked in the balls. Then he did Life Force, which I think is great. And for whatever reason, that didn't click with people. His remake of Invaders from Mars in '86 was really fun. I enjoyed that. He just never, and that didn't click with anybody either, it seemed, at the box office. He just didn't kind of
make it. It's
yeah.
weird. It is
It's
weird.
frustrating.
It's frustrating because I think the interesting thing for us is I bet like he was involved behind the scenes with all of his buddies, right? Um, did you mention 2013 Sex Chainsaw Massacre 30 with our Leatherface buddy Dan Yeager and Alexander Daddario? Sorry, Dan helped me a lot. Got to show him some props. We didn't, only because it wasn't on the list that I was going by. But that is also another one where that made a ton of scratch. Like
Oh yeah. That's
all of
actually the only other one in the franchise I've seen. So, and I enjoyed
yeah.
that. So I felt that was
Well,
great.
Alexander Daddario and Dan Yeager did a really good job living up to the Gunnar Hansen. But yeah, so we wanted to get him in. Um, but I think you're right. I think Tobe Hooper. I always got the feeling that Tobe Hooper was always hanging around with his friends, like helping Spielberg. Like, oh, you're working on a horror movie, I can throw some stuff your way. You know what I mean? And he never got the credit that the first movie. Um, he's a little bit like another director that I love, Joe Dante. Right? They
Mm-hmm.
make
Yeah,
they
Dante's another guy who.
just so close. One movie, and then they
Mhm.
kind of got swallowed up by the
The machine.
studios, and
Yeah.
and I think they're the opposite. Like Hooper's the opposite of like Carpenter, right? Carpenter is still making his own shit. Some of it doesn't work. Most of it doesn't work. But he's still like he has his own money where it's like I don't give a fuck. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like and the thing is maybe Hooper gets better chances if some of the scratch from this movie had gone to him. You know what I mean? Like so cuz like think about like the filmmakers he's hanging out with, Lucas, Spielberg, Coppola, right? They get so much money from their movies that they don't have to do anything for anybody. But Hooper's movie that made it, right? Hooper's Jaws, right? Hooper's Jaws is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? And basically, all of the money that he would have gotten from Jaws went to everybody else, right? And so maybe that's part of why it didn't work out for him. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a real interesting. It's kind of a sadness because the first movie is so well done, and it's so visceral and just engaging, and it spawned all these other franchises, all these other movies, and all these other things. And he didn't. He like I don't think he gets the credit either. Like that's another thing. We're celebrating its 50th anniversary. I think if you ask most people what the independent horror film that started it all, I think they all say this one, right? I think they all say Halloween, but in reality, Halloween doesn't happen unless Texas Chainsaw Massacre happens, right?
Yeah, well, the old saying, such and such walks, so such and such could run. Texas Chainsaw Massacre walked, so Michael Meyer could walk more menacingly.
Walk slower,
Yes, so
walk
he could walk
slower, and
slower
with a purpose.
and make
But
it
okay,
funny.
this
But
is a great place. This is a great place to end. But we got a lot of things coming up on the
woo,
Indie Escape
doggy
Network.
doggy, holy crap!
We really
Been
do.
going
We did go on for a long time tonight. Sorry. But I do want to get in. We have a couple of exciting announcements to make tonight.
on.
First announcement. Ooh, let me get rid of franchise viability. This Sunday, October 27th, the end of the night, with David Lee Madison returns to our network. Very exciting to have him back. He'll be with Scott Schiaffo, who has a new album coming out, and our own Joe Ridgely. So Sunday, October 27th, set your schedule, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Very exciting. And then we now have a card for it, and this is an announcement that was made last week on Loud and Nerdy. World Class Clown with Robert Bass, starting Thursday, November 7th at 10 p.m. Exclusively on the Indie Escape Network. Robert's an up-and-coming comic who's been around the block and also understands comedy, and he's going to do a show with comics, about comics, for comics. And also, I would imagine touch on a bunch of other things that we talk about on the Indie Escape Network. Super excited to have him, and that is a good thing. Rich, where can people find your stuff?
Well, all of my writing can be found at filmbuffonline.com. Coming up this week, I'm going to be starting probably in about 13 hours, heading out to the Philadelphia Film Festival for the remainder of its run through this coming weekend. So I'll be dropping some reviews there, including a review of Conclave, which I saw about 2 weeks ago, which I kind of liked up until craps the bed right in the last 20 minutes. As part of our ongoing Saturday Night Live at 50 series of weekly articles, this week we're going to be looking at some of the best Saturday Night Live spooky sketches that aren't David S. Pumpkins. Because honestly, I don't like David S. Pumpkins. Everybody else seems to love David Pumpkins. I'm like, eh. But we, kind of went through, looked at a lot. I looked at a lot of Halloween episodes, picked out some stuff, picked out a couple of things I think are kind of forgotten. Interestingly enough, 4 of the 11 were from 2 episodes. There are two episodes that yielded 2 sketches each for this. So that will be debuting Friday at 11:30 in the morning. I can be Film Buff Online can also be found on Facebook, where you'll get notifications of all the new stuff going up, plus all our fun history posts and other things. And I can be found on socials on Twitter and Blue Sky at Film Buff Rich.
Okay, so you can find me on the socials at JW the Movie Guy on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, and all the other places. And did I say Facebook? I said Facebook. You can also find me on Tuesday nights with my good buddies, Jerry and Kyle. We'll be doing Loud Nerdy tomorrow. We have some, Twilight Zone to discuss, maybe a movie from Jerry's basement. 2 of my favorite things in the world. And then next week, Rich, to conclude our horror film-a-versary, I present to you, we watched the first slasher and now maybe the best slasher movie of all time.
Ooh.
A Nightmare
Big
on Elm
talk.
Street. It is big talk. 40th anniversary of Wes Craven's creation of Freddy Krueger and Nancy, and Johnny Depp getting sucked up by a bed and all kinds of great things. It is a fantastic movie. It is well done, and I cannot wait to discuss it and rewatch because I just got the 4K. Super excited. But thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see everybody at the movies. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon. See you next week. Bye.
Bye-bye.